Kaiser, you're next. Get up there and warm up.
Carlos Kaiser's heart pounded against his ribs. This was the moment he spent 20 years avoiding. As the stadium awaited him, instead of running toward the field, he charged into the stands and threw a punch at a fan. A red card. He was sent off before even touching the ball. To the world, this seemed insane. But to Kaiser, it was an act of survival. If he played even 1 minute, the truth would be exposed, and so would his career. Carlos Kaiser was a world-class professional footballer who literally didn't know the first thing about playing football. For 26 long years, he built a career on one impossible strategy.
I don't think I can play.
Avoid the ball at all costs.
Listen, everyone loves my story, and you're gonna love it too.
It is 1983, Rio de Janeiro, a city where football turns boys into legends. Carlos Enrique Raposo, who would come to be known as Kaiser, desperately craved that lifestyle. The fame, the women, the parties, the wealth. He had the look of a star, tall, athletic, confident. But he couldn't play. Not a pass, not a shot, not even a clean first touch. So he used something stronger than talent: belief. If you look like you belong, people think you do. Instead of hitting the gym, he hit nightclubs. He became the ultimate wingman of Brazil's biggest stars like Romario and Edmundo.
Yes, let's go.
Players with power, influence, and access. He fixed their disputes, protected their image, and earned their trust. And in return, they opened doors, asking their clubs to sign their special friend. By 1985, Kaiser signed with Botafogo, one of Brazil's most prestigious clubs. On his first training session, he touched the ball once, then collapsed, screaming in pain. Doctors examine him, but nothing is clear. Sports medicine wasn't advanced in the 80s. If a player said they were in pain, doctors couldn't prove otherwise. They gave him 6 weeks of paid sick leave, just enough time to plan his next move and conceal his secret for a while. Because Kaiser knew that just being injured wasn't enough to keep a contract. So he came up with a plan. Look like a star who was simply having bad luck. He buys an enormous mobile phone, very rare and expensive at the time, and walks around the club loudly pretending to negotiate transfers with giants like Real Madrid and Juventus in broken English. No one at the club spoke English. No one questioned the call, or whether the phone even worked. Kaiser manufactured an image of his status. He paid journalists to praise him in their articles and paid ball boys to chant his name during matches, especially when the club president is watching. When the stakes are high, he vanishes. A new injury, a family emergency, or a sudden tragedy. All perfect excuses at just the right time. When people start to question him, he moves on to another club. There, he gets a fresh start, and the deception begins again. New coaches, new doctors, and new faces to fool. This cycle continued for 5 years, letting him build a strong reputation, with no one challenging his career history or impressive resume. Then, in 1990, while playing for Bangu Atletico Club, a man started screaming from the stands during a disastrous match. It was Castor de Andrade, the club owner, a powerful and feared figure rumored to have deep criminal connections. He yells at the coach and demands that Kaiser be sent on immediately.
Kaiser, play!
This is Kaiser's nightmare scenario. If he enters the game, everything ends. So he acts. He runs toward the opposing supporters and punches a man in the face. A brawl erupts. The referee shows red. Kaiser is removed without playing a second. Later, in the locker room, a furious Castor confronted him. Carlos breaks down.
God took my parents from me, but he gave me another father, you. Those fans were insulting you. I couldn't allow that.
Castor pauses for a moment. Instead of firing him, he kisses Kaiser on his forehead and extends his contract. From that moment, the impossible becomes routine. Fake injuries, fake offers, fake stardom. At this point, it's no longer luck. It's a system. And he's the one controlling it. He maintained his career for 26 years, signed with over 20 clubs, 3 countries, 0 games played. And the strangest part? Nobody stopped him. He simply retired after building a lifelong career in football. In interviews years later, he finally confesses to having a fake career. But the reaction wasn't anger. It was disbelief, laughter, and even admiration. Because he didn't beat defenders, he beat systems. In the world's most unforgiving sport, Carlos Kaiser was the greatest footballer to never play the game. While Kaiser's scam was a desperate solo act of survival, the following story wasn't about just one man. It was an entire team. Elite athletes, a global stage, gold medals on the line. And what they stole wasn't money. It was history.
Number 16, driving to
The pass is surgical. The layup is perfect. The halftime whistle blows, and the lead is an insurmountable 40 points. To the thousands watching in the Sydney arena, this is a masterclass in the human spirit. They think they are watching athletes who have overcome intellectual barriers to reach the world's most prestigious stage. But in the locker room, the mask slips. The coach gives a cold, whispered instruction.
Guys, we might be making it look too obvious. Slow down. Act confused.
The men nod, suppressing their grins. Behind the jerseys, there is no miracle, only a performance. Every missed shot is a choice. Every moment of hesitation is rehearsed. Because in this gold medal squad of 12, 10 of them are faking it. But as the team stands for the national anthem, one man in the lineup isn't just a player. He's a journalist. And he is the only one who knows that the anthem playing in the stadium is for a lie. Sydney, 2000. The world is watching a miracle. As the final notes of the Spanish national anthem resonate throughout the arena, a crowd of tearful fans and cheering athletes fills the stands. In the front row sits a man in a sharp suit, Fernando Martín Vicente. He isn't crying or cheering, he's calculating. As the head of the Spanish Federation for the Mentally Handicapped, he recognizes a lucrative business opportunity. To him, the Paralympics are a funding machine. More gold medals meant more government grants and more power. He wasn't focused on the athletes. He was focused on his return on investment. His plan began months earlier, in the shadows of semi-pro locker rooms, when a scout for the Spanish Federation approached an elite basketball player. He leaned in, whispering a proposition that sounds more like a heist than a sports contract.
You're good, but you'll never make the NBA. How would you like to be a gold medalist instead?
Free flight to Sydney, high-end gear, 5-star hotels.
One by one, 10 men joined the team. Men who had never spent a day in a special education classroom. Among the recruits was Carlos Ribagorda, a journalist who had auditioned for the scam just to see if Vicente was arrogant enough to let him in. But before the team could play, they had to face the examiners.
I understand that some of these
They sit in a sterile medical office a few days later. Across from them is a doctor holding a simple intelligence test. This is the only barrier between them and the world stage. The instructions from their coaches are clear.
Don't be too smart.
One player is given a basic logic puzzle, easy enough for a 10-year-old. With a blank look, he puts the wrong piece in the wrong hole. Another athlete whose muscles are defined by years of elite training gets a box of crayons and a piece of paper. He clumsily grips the yellow crayon and creates a messy scribble. The doctor takes one look at the drawing and quickly signs the medical clearance. With a few strokes of a pen, 10 perfectly healthy men are officially transformed into intellectually disabled athletes. By the time they arrived in Sydney, the team was a well-rehearsed theater cast. They would practice their confused walks for the cameras, then revert to being elite, arrogant athletes the moment the lens turned away. From his seat in the stands, Vicente watched his actors dominate the court. He didn't feel guilt. He felt like a genius. As the flashbulbs popped, players cheered and bit their medals, a photo was taken for the winning team and plastered across every newspaper. By the time the team returned to Spain, They were national heroes. But as the public celebrated, readers began to notice something strange. People in local gyms, neighbors, and former teammates saw familiar faces on the front pages.
What?
They saw men they knew were sharp and educated.
Oh my God, look at that.
The whispers grew into a roar, but inside his office, Carlos Ribagorda, the man who had stood on the podium and bit the same gold medal, was ready to spring the trap. He didn't just have notes, he had undeniable evidence. He published the truth. Out of the 12 men on that squad, 10 were imposters. He appeared a hero to some, but a man jumping a sinking ship to others. The fallout was nuclear. The medals were stripped, and Vicente resigned in disgrace. However, the true damage extended far beyond a few lost trophies. Vicente's scam led the International Paralympic Committee, IPC, to make a drastic decision. They banned all intellectually disabled athletes from the Paralympic Games. For the next 12 years, countless genuine athletes who had dedicated their lives to training were shut out from the world stage and suffered for a crime they didn't commit. As for the mastermind, Fernando Martín Vicente never saw a prison cell. Years later, he was fined only 5,400 euros, a tiny sum of the millions his scam had generated. He left behind the shattered Paralympic spirit, pockets full, and a ruined reputation. But while he stole a single medal in the shadows, our next subject stole a $30 million empire and erased 7 years of sports history to keep it. The air in the French Alps is thin, the road is steep, and the man in the yellow jersey is doing the impossible. While other riders are gasping for air, their legs screaming in agony, Lance Armstrong looks relaxed. He pedals with a rhythmic, mechanical fury, leaving the world's greatest athletes behind. To the millions watching on TV, it is a miracle. A man who had beaten terminal cancer is now defeating the best in the world. Before Lance, the greatest legends in history had reached the summit of the Tour de France up to 5 times. That was the absolute limit of human endurance. But Lance didn't just break that limit, he destroyed it. 7 consecutive years. He became a secular saint, the most tested athlete in the history of the world. But behind the yellow jersey and the podium appearances was something the cameras never saw. This wasn't just a comeback story. It was a $30 million shadow operation. A military-grade heist involving secret couriers, back-alley blood transfusions, and a web of forged documents so sophisticated, it would even make the CIA jealous. It is July 1999, and the Tour de France is underway. Lance Armstrong, fresh from a life-threatening battle, makes a stunning comeback. On the 10th day, he conquers a challenging mountain stage, crossing the finish line first. He slips on the iconic yellow jersey and stands proudly on the podium, celebrated as the hero of the day. A few days later, while the race is still on, the team's medical staff receives a confidential alert.
Lance's urine sample has tested positive for corticosteroids.
Corticosteroids, a banned performance enhancer. But in the 1990s, a positive drug test didn't lead to an instant ban. Instead, athletes were given a window to offer an explanation or seek a medical exemption. Lance and his team knew that if they didn't fill that window with a lie, the miracle would die. They had a few hours to save a $30 million empire before the news went public. That same night, while the rest of the world slept, Lance gathered his team in a quiet hotel room. They all knew that during that time, professional cycling was facing a huge crisis due to previous drug scandals that nearly destroyed the sport and caused viewership to drop.
Cycling has survived wars, but officials now fear it may not survive another drug scandal.
The UCI, the sport's governing body, was desperate to avoid another scandal. They needed the inspiring story of the man who beat cancer to be true. as he was the only one bringing in millions of dollars in TV revenue for cycling. The team's doctor pulled out a sheet of hotel stationery and typed a backdated medical certificate. He claimed that the banned steroid wasn't for performance, but a simple ingredient in a cream used to treat saddle sores caused by hours on a bicycle seat. It was a crude, desperate forgery. But when the team handed this paper to the officials, they weren't met with suspicion. The officials had accepted the excuse and buried the failed test. By the time the race reached Paris, Lance Armstrong was crowned the champion. The officials had allowed the lie to continue because for them, a clean sport was less valuable than a profitable hero. With the authorities now quietly protecting them, the team felt invincible.
We have a deal then.
But they knew they had to find a way to maintain the miracle for years to come. So they hired a ghost in the mountains, the Moto Man. He was a private contractor on a motorcycle who followed the race through the French Alps. Hidden in a thermos under his seat were pre-filled syringes of EPO, a drug that pumped oxygen into the blood, giving Lance the strength of a machine on the steep climbs. As the world watched the race's tense moments, the Moto Man would arrive at a secret spot on a mountain road and pass the syringes to the team's staff in a handoff that took only seconds. The team then injected the rider in the back of the team bus, hid the needles in empty soda cans, and flushed the evidence before the sun rose. For 7 consecutive years, this was the architecture of the scam. But a $30 million lie requires more than drugs and a bike. It demands silence. To keep the world from finding out, Lance Armstrong enforced a mafia-style code known as the Omerta. It is a vow of silence that became his ultimate weapon. The rule was simple. The moment you join the team, you are compromised. You are just as guilty as he is. If a teammate ever dared to expose the truth, Lance's message was clear.
If I go down, we all go down.
For years, this wall of silence held firm. Lance transformed from athlete to global power, mingling with presidents, raising $500 million for charity, and destroying anyone who questioned him. But even the most sophisticated scam has a shelf life. The first crack didn't come from a lab or a drug test. It came from Floyd Landis, a disgraced former teammate whose career had fallen apart and who had nothing to lose. Landis revealed the entire operation through emails, shattering the Omerta. The U.S. anti-doping agency, USADA, launched a major investigation, subpoenaing teammates who'd stayed silent for 10 years. When confronted with the possibility of prison for perjury, they finally agreed to speak out. They described a military-grade operation that was so professional and so well-funded that the USADA officially called it the most sophisticated, professionalized, and successful doping program that sport has ever seen. In 2012, Lance's empire crumbled. He lost all 7 Tour de France titles. His sponsors abandoned him, and his charity cut ties with him. And the most chilling part? Officials didn't give the titles to runners-up. Almost all were caught in scandals too. Instead, those years were left blank in the record books. A permanent white space left there to remind us that in sports, a miracle that seems too good to be true usually is.